Okay, we've started recording. This is um this is Nate Gallinger. Actually, is that the right way to pronounce the last bit? Gallinger?
Gallinger.
Gallinger. Okay. They are a mentor. They knew one of my mentors from high school, and now they're helping me with some career stuff. They work at Rivian, and they actually got their degree from NC State in both electrical engineering and then masters in mechanical engineering, if I recall correctly. So,
That's right.
um, the first question I have is why did you choose like your specific major path going from electrical and then mechanical in that specific order?
Okay, that is a great question. Um, I was really interested in robotics, and I had taken most of the robotics related classes in the computer engineering department. I had taken the controls class and the embedded class. And for my senior year, I don't know if you still have to do this, but we had to take technical electives, which were
I
kind of
believe I believe we still do, and then there's also senior design.
right. So I did a senior design with Dr. Grant, with Marshall, and we did a little robot. And for the technical electives, a lot of people would take, there were two really easy ones at the time. It was like intro nuclear and engineering economics or something. Those were the ones that people would take because they knew they were easy. I had a friend who was in mechanical who was still doing his intro classes. He's like, hey, why don't you come over and take statics and dynamics with me, which were known to be the extremely difficult ones. And I was like, whatever, try it out. Seems cool. So just to take classes with him, I did those instead. And I had really, really good professors in the mechanical department. And I was talking to them a lot because it was my senior year. I was trying to decide what to do, and it was the 2009 financial recession. Jobs were not plentiful. They're like, hey, you could come and do a master's here, and you don't have to take the GREs if you
Mhm.
stay at NC State. I was like, oh, that sounds good. Just have to write a little essay, and I get to stay, and I can go and hang out with these other cool professors, and they have a bunch of other robotics classes that are I, honestly kind of the same classes. I took another robotics controls class, another it was like a mechatronics class, but from the mechanical standpoint. So it was kind of just rounding out the uh, robotics background from a different perspective. And also, I believe for a master's, you have to take 9 classes, three of which can be outside of your major. So, of the 9 classes, I took two more computer engineering master's classes. I took another embedded class and something else that I don't even remember,
Mhm.
robotics related.
So you've mentioned a lot of stuff about robotics thus far, and obviously now you work on cars. And is it a similar process in terms of how you have to think about the car as a system and a robot as a system? I mean, I know that you did a lot of work at startups, and that may have also impacted your way of doing things with the car specifically. But
Yeah, I mean, a car really is just a robot, right?
Mhm.
It's just, robots can be a lot of different form factors. A car is just a four-wheeled robot with no arms. So I think it's essentially the same thing. A car is just maybe the most complicated robot you can build because it has so many very strict requirements for people's comfort and safety. And
Mhm.
it also has to, drive at 60 miles an hour for, you know, many hours at a time without anything ever breaking. Yeah, I'd say you
Mhm.
think about it more or less the same way, but depending on your constraints, like, more focus on safety, more focus on comfort. Whereas a robot can be maybe a little more experimental. It's going to be lower volume. So that influences the way you think about the design some. Yeah, overall kind of the same,
Mhm.
but kind of different. I don't know. I don't
It's
know if I answered that very concisely.
well, I mean, one of the requirements is I'm supposed to keep pressing until I get a response that I feel is long enough. So feel free to take your time. I've got nothing else to do. I'm sitting in my dining room while everything else moves around my house. So got all day.
If you need more detail about any parts of it, feel free to follow up.
Mhm. Um, my next question is you're located in the Bay Area. How much did, be starting at NC State? We've talked about this before. Started at NC State, did all the classes at NC State, wanted to go to startups and other cool projects that were not in NC State. How much has the location impacted your kind of career development?
Which location?
Referring to starting at, you started at Raleigh, and how
Ah,
much did being in Raleigh either like limit or grow what you could do as a electrical engineer or mechanical engineer in
right. Well, you also went to science and math, so I'm sure you also had a lot of very smart friends who went off to all of the best schools and uh, probably had to make the decision of which one you wanted to do, which was likely influenced by the fact that NC State was free. Um, and at the time, I was certainly drawn by going to a bigger school, but it was kind of being a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond situation. And um, I think being at NC State really allowed me to um, leverage all of the resources available. Like you, I did the honors program. I did all of the study abroads. I did all of the internships in the co-op program, and um, was always in the career center and talking to the different advisors. Um, and then when I got into jobs with people from other schools, the NC State education, it really stands up. I've never felt like I was lacking in any ways, with the possible exception of if you're trying to go to business school. I think that's the one place where it really matters that you go somewhere fancy, to just to have the connections. But you can always do that later on. Most people go to business school in their late 20s. And
Mhm.
I've thought about it, and every time I've looked at the curriculum, it's just looked so boring.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. My instructor is going to like that answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I think most engineers feel that way.
Mhm.
But in terms of location, I think NC State has all of the resources available to make you competitive anywhere. But I did feel a little bit like an outsider when I first got to California. I don't know whether that was internal, just my what do you call it, imposter syndrome, or if it was real. But at this point now, I don't feel any different than anyone else that I work with. And the majority of the people that I work with also went to state schools. Now, a lot of them are California state schools, not North Carolina state schools. But
You happen to be in California, so
from the guys on my team, so I went to NC State. One guy went to school in North Dakota. One guy is from Iowa. One guy, maybe UC Irvine, and then one guy India. So like
mhm.
no MITs, no Carnegie Mellons, no Stanfords or Berkeleys. Like we're all just regular state schools. And the way that engineering school accreditation works is like if intro to electrical engineering isn't taught to a certain standard, then the school loses its accreditation. So the education is pretty good across the board, I've found.
So um kind of expanding on the NC State experience. The research labs, you've mentioned a couple. I actually did look into Crim. I've really struggled figuring out if it's still running. Their website their website is not great. They're still listed in all those directories, but I looked into them really hard. I tried to get on the guy. I tried to find grad students working for them, but I couldn't tell you if the lab is still running. But you mentioned that specific lab and some of the other labs. What ex in you if you were to have to define engineering research, specifically engineering research, in words that do not include engineering or research in them, what would you say that it is?
Slave labor for a professor.
Maybe a little bit more, but I know what you mean.
I never did engineering research, so I'm not an expert, but it from the little exposure I had doing my senior project and then doing my master's project, it seemed like I don't know, I had friends that thrived on it and enjoyed it. If you find a professor that has a cool project that you want to do, I think it is possible to go and be successful. But professors are not trained in people management. So you're going to get a very wide variety of experiences in terms of how well you're mentored. Um, I think, like anything, your best resource is going to be talking to other students and getting suggestions from them of who's doing cool stuff, and honestly, showing up at professors' office hours and just talking to them is going to get you way farther than emailing people, because professors get a million emails a day, and from probably prospective students and all kinds of stuff, and most of them they probably ignore. Oh, I went the internship route and really enjoyed it because it gets you, oh well, unless you really want to stay in academia. I never had any interest in that. I'm not particularly good at school. So for me, just getting into a company and getting a feel of what that was actually like, and going ahead and starting to find the type of company that I wanted to end up at, I found really useful.
I've considered it. There's definitely a lot of doing the research paper for Marshall and like the zebra corns. That was fun. That was a lot of engineering. Like I really enjoyed that specific of we're gonna make a thing and we're gonna do all the testing for it, and then we're gonna publish it for other people to use. It actually did get copied by other teams, which made me happy.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well,
But that kind of this is the process of what we used and how we designed the thing, and this is a thing for you to copy, and that kind of we're going to write it all down and we're going to make it rigorous instead of leaving it as an just a this is what we did, this is why we did it, you can copy this.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
super cool. I may be a little bit jaded, but to me, it seems like the majority of research is let's find some super obscure and ultimately useless thing to research just because no one's ever done it before. Because that's ultimately in research, the biggest driving factor is something that nobody's done. And often there's a reason nobody's done it, and it's because it's super niche and doesn't actually help anybody. Oh, whereas if you're at a company only continues to exist if it's building something useful to people.
Yeah. um Speaking not speaking of the country, um country company, speaking of kind of the field in general, you've mentioned a lot about office hours of professors and things that you did with internships, kind of in our conversations before this. So if you were to publish not publish if you were to announce to any all of the people applying for the internships at Rivian or in electrical engineering specifically at NC State or any other place you might feel like you have enough credibility. If you were to say that, what tell all of the students, what would you say? This is a broad answer, and you can say don't do internships. That is an
Hmm.
option. It would be funny though. It would be funny, but maybe most people wouldn't listen.
So you mean what would I say in terms of advice to get the internship or advice
Yes,
for life or life for
advice to get
college?
an internship, advice to get into a specific region. of engineering, a job, an opportunity, things of that nature?
I would say think about, of the limited things that you've done so far, think hard about the ones that you enjoyed the most, and then find more projects where you can do more of that. So it sounds like you're doing this Baja SAE.
Mhm.
Get as involved in that as possible and find ways that you can be involved that you enjoy. Don't just do stuff you hate to put it on a resume. Like if you're doing something that you enjoy, it's not going to feel like work. You're going to end up going above and beyond, and you're going to apply it to other things.
Mhm. So I actually talked with Ty Saman, another mentor for 900. I'm not sure if you know them, but Marshall does. The exact wording that he used, I wrote it down, is do the thing for work that you would do for free. That was his response to the question.
Yeah, so try as hard as you can to figure out what that is,
Mhm.
and then do as much of it as you can so that when you go out and look for jobs, you can point to it and say, hey, look, I did this. I can come and do more of this for you.
Mhm.
And be keeping a running list with everything you do. This is what I like doing. This is what I don't like doing, and constantly drive towards the stuff that you like.
Yeah. The these one moment.
And sometimes to avoid things that you don't like, you have to do something uncomfortable. So I left my first job, which was very comfortable and stable and paid well and was in San Diego, which is very nice, to move to the Bay Area and be poor and be stressed and work hard. But I knew that it was a direction that I had to go to get into the stuff that I like doing more. And now I make a lot more money and I'm
And
happier.
kind of speaking in the same vein, you've mentioned, you kind of described that you've moved around through a couple startups, that they start up, they last for that, sometimes they might last for a good little while, but then they kind of fall apart. What was your experience working through those situations, if you ever had anywhere, startup starts, it's going well, it kind of falls apart after 4 or 5 months? What do you do next, or how did you feel during?
Uh, the first time I felt incredibly stressed, and then I got fired, and then 2 months later they ran out of money and they ceased to exist, and I felt existential dread. I felt like I don't know if I ever want to be an engineer again. Maybe I'll just go and work at McDonald's. Um, I I don't know. It was really rough, and I think I had a handful of people in my life say like, "You're burnout. It's okay. Don't force it. Do something else for a while. It'll come back. And when you're ready, you'll know." And that was very true. Um, I'd say in terms of avoiding those situations, I mean, I kind of knew that I was, I've joined a couple companies that I think I knew that they weren't going to be successful, but I still personally benefited because I learned a lot and I made a lot of connections. So I think there is still some benefit there. But in terms of evaluating whether a company is or isn't going to be successful before you join, I think that's a very useful tool in terms of thinking about whether or not they're building something that people want and that people are going to use and that's going to be sold in a scale and in a way that actually is profitable. But that takes a while to develop as well.
So you don't have to answer, but if you had to ballpark, how many times did that have to happen? I'm just curious because
Oh,
one of my friends is actually starting a startup right now, by the name of Sunrise Robotics. We've been talking. This is the same friend who me and him are starting one of the a combat robotics club, and we're talking about all right, this percent of startups fail. How much do you think it's going to be until this one fails? And we're trying to figure out kind of in general, how many times did you have to take to realize, how many times did you have to go to a startup and understand that this one might fail until you felt pretty confident that it was right, that your intuition
Uh,
that it would fail is right?
I don't know. That's hard to say because I had a pretty good intuition that the first one was going to fail. But I don't know. The longer you go, the better you get at it. Maybe 3 or 4 years. I'm pretty confident now. I don't know how long it's been, but the first thing you got to think about is, am I making something that anyone wants? Or is it just something that I want? Or that I think maybe somebody wants? So before you write a single line of code or do a single prototype, it's good to go out and talk to your prospective audience and say, hey, is this something that you want? Or if even you can get them to sign up to buy something that you haven't built yet and then go build it, that's even better. What are you guys trying to do?
Well, I'm not actually in the startup because I don't have the time to do it. So what we've discussed is he's kind of making swerve robots that would move in a limited scale, mostly kind of as a platform moving device, as in that would be more accessible than, not quite a industry application, but more of a moving shelf that follows you around in your house, which, me personally, I'm not certain it would succeed, but I can see how someone might want it. It's
Yeah.
it's it's something that I just do not have the time to do it, but I'm supporting him. I'm here in spirit.
Yeah, there are also a handful of companies out there that have something like that. But I think to me, the cooler thing would be to make it as an open source project and get your name out there.
Mhm.
Um, but the one other thing about doing startups, so because of my internships, I spent 5 years in undergrad and then 2 years in grad school. So that's 7 years.
Mhm.
So by the time I started my first job, I'm already like 23, 24. The thing about startups is they take an enormous amount of energy. And by the time you're in your late 20s, you're kind of over it. So if it's something that you want to do it as soon as possible. Because the way a startup succeeds is you spend 24/7 on it. You just
Mhm.
forget your friends, you forget your family, you forget your hobbies, you forget to eat and exercise. You just lock yourselves in a room for like 2 years. And by the time you're in your late 20s, you're like, I want to date people and go to restaurants and go on vacations. And I don't really feel like working that hard anymore.
I want to experience the sun for once.
Yeah, I'm big about sun these days.
Mhm.
But
It's
yeah,
a
I'd highly recommend it.
mhm.
Even if you don't end up being successful, and most don't, I think you end up becoming a more well-rounded employee than most people that just worked at big companies.
Mhm. I for I can't count, so I don't remember what question number I'm on, but I only have one more on my sheet, so I'm hoping that's five. I'll probably go through the recording, and if I've missed something, I'll just shoot you an email about it. Um, the last question that I have is, engineering is both a highly individualized and highly team-based um, experience, especially in smaller projects and even kind of in the bigger area that you worked on. You described your team of five earlier in this recording. How much did you say that you had to work with the team and kind of balancing skill sets, but also had to do design work by yourself? And what did you find you were better at based on your experience thus far?
I'm much better at the team activities. Even on the senior project that I did with Marshall and one other guy, Marshall built the whole robot. The other guy did all the code. I just did the paperwork and the team organizing. So from the very beginning, I've been like a project manager. I don't think I'm rarely the strongest engineer in the room. I have had a lot of jobs where I was writing code and that was the whole job. And I often found myself frustrated that I didn't have enough exposure to the bigger picture. I didn't want to do something when I didn't understand why I was doing it. So now my whole job is just to think about the why, and other people are the ones that do. So I like the collaboration. I think that I have a stronger skill to be able to think about a big problem and think about how it can be solved. And then once the high level of how it can be solved is done, I'm happy to hand it off to someone else to do the fine tuning.
The house. You focus on the whys, other people focus on the hows.
Yeah.
Well, um, I don't have other questions. I believe we've gone through all the ones on my list. So I mean, if you prepared questions for me, I guess you can ask them, but
No, the one that you're the most frustrating interview question that you consistently get is, tell me about a time that either something went wrong or that you failed or you got into a conflict and how you overcame that. So just food for thought for future interviews. That's a
well,
really popular one.
I mean, I failed quite a bit. We failed to I think the most important one has got to be in terms of engineering experience was the district championships last year. We had our entire robot. I had worked so hard all season. I was already on my 300th hour of logged time, and that excluded a good 50 hours I'd spent unlogged. I had done all this work coordinating the drive team. I had done drive team meetings. I had worked all of it, and the entire scoring mechanism of our robot just didn't function because
Oh,
we didn't have
wow.
a reset button. And that's after I'd asked for a reset button the week prior and was told we weren't going to need it. And so I had been working so hard and it just failed. It failed. It failed. It failed. And eventually ended up with me having to go to the team and basically have a come to Jesus moment about, all right, guys, we've gone through two-thirds of this day's competition. We are currently sitting in eighth. We can probably muscle our way up and get a little higher. But if we do not improve, we will not make it to Worlds. And it was just failure after failure. And the whole team is absolutely dejected because we're just sitting there like, we know we can do better. We know everything can work. It's just failure after failure after failure. Whole matches, the robot does not work. Or if it does work, it doesn't work to the standard that we like. And so it's just we had to have a whole, all right, Chris, you need to put this button on the computer. We need to have a reset button. I don't care how long it takes. If we have to miss a match, we have to miss a match. We are getting this on the thing. And it was, all right, everyone, I had to pretty much, it was, I'm standing right, but there was in our pit, there was a shelf where we had the drive station computer. So it's all of the programmers on one side, all of the mechanicals on one side. I'm standing in the middle. Marshall's in my way, constantly moving back and forth. I'm not over it. If he had stopped getting in my way, everything would have been done 10 minutes faster. But I'm standing there. I'm like, all right, is this getting done? Is this getting done? Is this getting done? Is this getting done? Eventually it worked. Unfortunately, it never worked while I was coaching. So I didn't coach the playoffs for that specific tournament, and that was what propelled us to Worlds, that playoffs. And I was sitting there, just freaking out about everything. Eventually, we got it to work, and when we got it to work, robot chef's kiss, beautiful, best performances that far. But it was pretty much I'm standing there. All right, guys, I know everything is burning, but we're gonna put out the fire. We're just gonna have to do it slowly, and that
That's good.
was yeah.
That's a good answer. Um, I think you're going to get asked this again, and I think you should use the same scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I would uh, focus on one, what you did that worked, and two, what you've learned to do differently in the future. Just food for
Mm-hmm.
thought on that.
All
I
right.
think that's a really good answer. Your passion comes through on it.
Mhm. All right.
Cool.
Awesome, man. So I'm gonna end the recording now, and